There's so much lockdown these days regarding willingness to stand out and fear regarding standing out. But if you're really tuned in to your own strengths, your own values, that will support you and being able to take actions that will move things forward in the direction of betterment, even if, especially if that has you standing out as different.
Welcome to Work Unscripted. I'm your host, Marlo Lyons. I'm here to toss aside the corporate scripts for unfiltered truths. We are tackling real work challenges with no sugarcoating, providing you with the strategies to thrive and find fulfillment in your career. It's time to turn the page. It's time to be unscripted. Today's episode is for anyone who's ever been told they're too sensitive at work, or for any leader who's struggled to manage someone who feels everything deeply and perhaps even cries with every piece of feedback. We're talking about what it really means to be a highly sensitive person, an HSP, and how that impacts your career, communication, and even your mental health. My guest today is Heather Dominick. She's a trailblazer in helping highly sensitive leaders and professionals transform sensitivity from a source of stress into a strategic strength. We dig into burnout, feedback conversations, and how managers can help support HSPs without coddling or criticizing. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by corporate life or struggled to give feedback that lands with empathy, this conversation will change how you lead and how you see yourself. Let's get unscripted. Heather, welcome to the show. Welcome to Work Unscripted.
Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
So am I. So we are talking about highly sensitive people, HSPs, for those who don't know. You have found out that you are both highly sensitive, and of course, we all know you're highly successful, but not everyone knows what that first label truly means. So what does it mean to be a highly sensitive person?
Yes, a great question to start us off. So first and foremost, always valuable to acknowledge that highly sensitive person is far from a term coined by me. It really comes out of research from the mid-1990s. There's one woman in particular who's most well known. Her name is Dr. Elaine Aron. She's most well known connected to the research because she wrote the book, The Highly Sensitive Person. According to Dr. Elaine Aron and subsequent research, there are 20% of us who are born into the world as a highly sensitive person. I think that's always important to emphasize right from the start, because this isn't something that your parents or your early childhood teachers did to you. You were born into the world as an HSP. And what that means is that your nervous system is wired to take in stimulation at a much higher degree than someone who's not highly sensitive. And that higher level of stimulation impacts the way that you process the world.
So this is probably misunderstood a lot by others who aren't HSPs, I would assume.
I would say definitely yes. When I first began this work over a decade ago, when I discovered that I was a highly sensitive person, hardly anyone was talking about it at that time. It's definitely more available as a concept, terminology in the zeitgeist now, over a decade later. And again, the research is brand new, right? Relatively, seeing that we're talking about the mid-1990s. So there's a lot of people who are not highly sensitive, but also a lot of people who are highly sensitive, who are completely unaware of this personality trait.
I can see some people who are not highly sensitive, or even those who don't know about this, calling other people like emotional or introverted or fragile. But HSPs aren't that. Like, they're something different, right?
Such a great question. So the answer is yes and no.
Ooh.
So, just even in your question, it brings up the topic or consideration of a range, right, of the ways that our behavior is impacted based on our physiological makeup. So, for example, you have some people who are ADHD. You have some people who are highly sensitive people. You have some people who would be considered more of an empath. And these are all different degrees or registers, along that range of how the nervous system operates. So the answer, yes and no, really comes down to the individual as a highly sensitive person and how trained you are to be able to manage your nervous system. So, for example, someone who might be labeled as over emotional, that could be because they are a highly sensitive person and they just haven't yet learned how to manage their nervous system. But what that also speaks to is that just because you're a highly sensitive person doesn't automatically equate that you will be over emotional. I hope that complex answer makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. But how did you figure out you were an HSP? Like, if I'm listening to this and I'm like, ooh, huh.
Yes.
How did you know?
Yes. So again, when I discovered that I was a highly sensitive person, it was a lot less present in the zeitgeist, even just as a term. I personally had never heard of a highly sensitive person. What brought me to understand that I was HSP is that I had been self-employed for just about around 6-7 years at that time. And I had managed to be able to, from an external perspective, create some incredible success in my business in those first few years, including bringing my business across the $1 million mark for the first time. And I would love to say that that was just an amazing experience and super celebratory, and everything in my life changed for the better at that moment. But that is not true at all. It was actually the exact opposite. I found myself just massively overwhelmed. I was overworked. I was overexhausted. I was overweight. And so I was really questioning, I don't know if I'm cut out for this whole self-employed endeavor. And if I'm not going to continue with this, then, what am I going to do? And in hindsight, I can say it was really a dark night of the soul. And it was that period of self-inquiry and self-questioning that led me to Dr. Elaine Aron. And when I met Dr. Elaine Aron and I learned what a highly sensitive person was, it was all of these light bulbs went off and all of these pieces clicked into place. And I was oh, this is probably a primary reason why I find so many of the quote unquote steps and actions that you need to take to be successfully self-employed really excruciating. When it seems when I attend these business trainings or conferences or take online courses, that the majority of the other people in these trainings and conferences and courses are having a fabulous time and are super energized by all of what is required. And so then I just started to really take into consideration what the characteristics and qualities and personality traits of an HSP are and how that then would impact my decision to remain self-employed. And that was really the beginning.
So that leads me right into, what are these characteristics? What might we observe in somebody who is an HSP besides that overwhelm that you exhibited and felt?
For sure, for sure. So, I'll start with kind of like a zoom out or an umbrella description and then zoom into through my work and research over the years have identified as like what I refer to as top 12 HSP shadows and top 12 HSP strengths. So first, the zoom out is that overstimulation of the nervous system really it exhibits in symptoms that just really makes sense when you consider the phrase of overstimulation. For example, a person who's highly sensitive will have be greater impacted by something like sound or sight. Or even smells, right? So something like you can take into consideration, say like maybe a rock concert, right? So though an HSP would go to a rock concert of like a musician that they totally love, they would be having a very different experience than someone who's not highly sensitive. They would really be taking in the sound and the smells and the sight that goes along with a rock concert, and possibly even need some recovery time afterwards, even if, again, it was like their favorite musician and they were just like so thrilled and happy that they were there. Where a non-HSP would go to a rock concert, be like totally energized and be like, what indie band are we going to go see next? Even though it's like 1:00 in the morning after this like 3 to 4 hour concert. So then from there, you can zero in or zoom into, again, those top 12 shadows and strengths that I mentioned. I won't go into all of them just for time's sake, but I'll speak to, say, some of the top 3 of shadows. Sure. So you definitely mentioned overwhelm, and this is where it's a great moment to talk about when we speak of HSP overwhelm, we're really talking about physiological overwhelm, not like the, Vogue quiz, your to-do list is too long, overwhelm. We all get that.
So this is like feeling it in your body.
I would say feeling it and really impacted, right? So the feeling in the body almost can equate to sometimes like a nervous system shut down. Things become really foggy, fuzzy. It's hard to link thoughts, put them together. You might have difficulty answering questions. You can't make a decision. It's too difficult to be able to process, steps X, Y, and Z. And there's, again, kind of sometimes some physical additional symptoms that go along with that overwhelm, like, sweating, excruciatingly, getting sweaty or sweaty palms or, shortness of breath, right? So this is the overwhelm that we're talking about. From there, additional to top shadows are what I like to refer to as over responsibility and over protection. So in brief, the shadow of over responsibility tends to connect to our tendency as HSPs to really be able to have a deep sense of what another person is experiencing. Because our nervous system is wired to take in stimulation, we are reading things like physical cues, verbal cues, even energetic cues more in a fine-tuned way than someone who's not HSP. So we can often, again, interpret another person's experience. And often when, again, an HSP is untrained and they're operating from that shadow of over-responsibility, they take in the concept that if they can sense what someone else is experiencing, then that the HSP is responsible for how that person is feeling or experiencing, hence the shadow of over-responsibility. Then again, in brief, overprotection really takes in that shadow of overwhelm, takes in that shadow of over-responsibility. And the HSP, and I really appreciate the way Dr. Aaron languages this, will not only fear becoming overwhelmed, but will fear even the possibility of becoming overwhelmed, right? all out of that concern of kind of losing control of one's physical, physiological, emotional, mental capabilities. And so then the HSP will go into overprotection as a shadow behavior, protecting themselves against possibilities of that overwhelm or that over responsibility, which can really equate to like withdrawing, right? Isolating, being very selective about what the HSP chooses to do or not to do. So hopefully just even listening to those shadows, you kind of like can start to put the dots together and it's like, that would make self-employment or any type of leadership and leadership very, very challenging. Right?
Absolutely. But there have to be some superpowers, right? Whenever there's a negative, there's always a positive as well. So there must be some superpowers that come along with this.
Absolutely. So that's where we then flip to those top 12 strengths that I've really identified in my work. And again, to speak to just top 3. So when we are really trained in our nervous system, we are highly empathetic, we are highly intuitive, and we are excellent deep feelers, thinkers, and listeners. So similarly, as you start to just tune into what those strengths could possibly look like, you can imagine, wow, someone who's really empathetic and really intuitive and an excellent listener would make a really fantastic practitioner of fill in the blank of a service-based business and or an effective leadership position. So it really comes down to untrained versus trained, shadows versus strengths.
How does this show up at work? From a leader perspective and from an employee perspective?
Yes. So again, back to trained or untrained, right? When an HSP is really trained in their nervous system abilities, it actually makes you an excellent leader because you are really able to pick up on fine-tuned details regarding other people and their strengths and their abilities. So it really helps to be able to really apply different types of team members to different types of tasks and roles so that everyone on the team is working effectively and efficiently. If you are more of a solopreneur, it absolutely supports you in being able to have a successful selling conversation, to understand what a prospect needs, and to really be able to effectively communicate, because excellent with language is another one of our HSP strengths. Effectively communicate how your service will make a difference for that person, as well as then to be able to continue to support the individuals when they shift from prospect to client so that they're making continued next level progress, right? As an employee, it can, when working from one's HSP strengths, really serve and support you to be able to fit a niche within a team that cannot necessarily be filled in the exact same effective way as other people on the team. And this is where it goes back to, as HSPs, we are only 20% of the population. So for example, if you're on a team of 5, you can guarantee that the 4 others most likely are not HSP. So that equips you with a unique perspective and often an ability to see creative solutions, to have inspired ideas that other members on the team either aren't going to be able to see or aren't going to be able to see in the same way. Now, again, that's if we're operating from our strengths as a trained HSP. If we're operating from our shadows, then all those things I just described become extremely challenging,
right, in the workforce. And so those who are not trained, they must have coping mechanisms to get through the day then. And I think you described 2 of them, right? There's the pusher and the hider.
Absolutely. So in my work, I've really identified 3 primary coping mechanisms. You just named 2, pushing, hiding, and then the third I like to refer to as combo plattering, which means that you flip flop back and forth between the two, pushing and hiding and pushing and hiding. This is extremely taxing on the nervous system. So this is where it's helpful and valuable to kind of just peel back the layers on what we mean when we're talking about coping mechanisms. And coping mechanisms are not all good, and coping mechanisms are also not all bad. Now, the in-between understanding is that for us as HSPs, most of our coping mechanisms were developed unconsciously. We go back to being only 20%. We go back to being that this research is fairly new. And then we go back to the understanding that most of us as HSPs at this point in 2025 likely grew up without others around them really understanding that you were a highly sensitive person, right? So the support, whether from family, whether from educational systems, most likely was not there to help you be able to maximize your nervous system ability. So then therefore these coping mechanisms developed. And if you tend towards the pushing coping mechanism, most likely you learned how to show up just like the other 80%. This goes back to my story, right? Yes.
And me, I have been there. You just keep pushing till you burn out.
That's it, right? You will get done what somebody who's not highly sensitive, the other 80% gets done, but it will come at a higher cost for you. And that typically that cost will reveal itself in physical illness, right? Health issues, literally because the nervous system becomes taxed, right? It will also reveal itself in relationship issues because your ability to show up for your personal relationships is limited because you're using all of your nervous system reserves to be able to drive those tasks across the finish line. So again, going back to the, example of the rock concert, you'll have another 80%er, a non-HSP. They'll do all of the tasks needed for their role on the team at work. And then they're like, yes, let's go out. Let's have a beer. Like life is good. And the HSP will just kind of like crawl home and get in.
And just level you exactly to the point of exhaustion. Yeah. And also, when you work, because a vacation's coming up and then you go on vacation and you get sick as a dog. I mean, the second you let yourself down, right? You're just, and that would happen to me for years. Yes. Pretty much every vacation, I'd be sick the first half of it.
Yes, right. That's such another great example because literally the nervous system needs to recalibrate, right? So the body will shut you down if you're not trained to regulate your nervous system. Where again, a non-HSP will do all of that same work and they'll go on vacation and they'll, be out dancing every night until 1:00 and happy as a clown.
And what's the hider? Because I have also been a hider. When you're called out for being an HSP without somebody actually using the letters HSP, right? Then I hide and I go the other direction.
Yes. Well said. So I hear you speaking potentially more to like the combo platter, but let's talk about the hider first. So the hider as a coping mechanism tends more towards that shadow that I spoke of earlier of overprotection. Now, the difference between the hiding coping mechanism and the combo plattering coping mechanism that, again, I just heard you start to speak to is that the hider will hide first, not as a result of needing to recover from pushing, but it will be their first go-to as a way of coping, right? Again, the fear of even the possibility of becoming overwhelmed. So this will often be the person on the team or, the solopreneur who, oh my gosh, all of their stuff looks amazing and fantastic. Like they have like the most beautiful website. They create like the most beautiful, chart projections for the team. But when it comes to delivering the idea or the creative solution that they can see, or taking the marketing actions to actually move those ideas into motion, suddenly the HSP has so many other things that are top priority to take care of. Right? It's like suddenly either they're sick and they have to take care of themselves, or they have to take care of children or other relatives or friends or neighbors' hamsters, or other people on the team. And then suddenly, the HSP is like, wow, like I've been doing all of this work. Like, why don't I have the results to show for it? That's the hider. And equally, the combo platter is, again, more of what you were speaking to. I like to refer to the definition of being a combo platter as HSP insanity, because you can like literally feel like you're going crazy, right? Like you'll like push, and then you'll just totally need to like pull back. And so it's a real sense of like gas, brake. And there isn't ever really that sense of full flow, momentum forward. It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's a constant experience. Now, again, not bad or good regarding coping mechanisms. For many of us, this has helped us as HSPs, like do what we've been able to do up until now. The key is to then be able to shift the coping mechanism into more of a creating mechanism, so that you no longer have to really feel the withdrawing or the tax to nervous system impact. That's our ultimate goal.
How do you do that? Because I have never felt so seen right now. So how do you do that? How do you get to that ultimate goal of that flow?
Yeah, absolutely. And I so appreciate that phrase, the ultimate goal of flow, right? That is really it. Or, you can also just even use the word freedom, right? It's just like, just feel like you're actually free to be comfortable in your own skin and to work in a way that really serves and supports you. So it really is a retraining process. And I like to really emphasize that. It's why the work that I do is called the Highly Sensitive Leadership Training Program, because it is a retraining of these coping mechanisms, right? So you can think about any other moment or experience that you've had in your life where you learned how to do something one way, and then years down the road, you realize like, oh, there's actually a better way to do this, right? It could even be something as simple as like learning how to do a sit-up, right? When you were in primary school. And maybe like you just didn't learn how to do it correctly. So then you've always had kind of like a tightness in the right side of your lower back, right? But then suddenly you're working with a physical trainer, 20 years, 30 years later, and they're like, hey, this sit-up thing that you're doing, if we just start to do it slightly a little bit differently, you won't feel that lower back pain anymore. So it's very similar when it comes to operating as an HSP. You learn how to retrain your nervous system. So much of what I teach in the leadership training programs is what I like to refer to as proactive use of the nervous system. We do that with nervous system management tools. We also do that with beginning to apply those nervous system management tools to outer actions. So you start to see the way that you're taking outer actions through a different lens, a different perception. You want to be involved in a retraining process over time. Again, in the same way that you would work with a physical trainer, right? You don't go to one physical training session, right? Or go to the gym once and then suddenly you're like, wow, I can only lift 5 pounds yesterday, but now today I can lift 25 pounds. You have to like literally retrain the muscles to take on more weight. And it's the same with the nervous system. But the more you learn to proactively set your nervous system up ahead of times of potential overwhelm, then the easier you start to manage those moments of overwhelm versus the coping mechanisms, which are reactive to the ways that you experience overwhelm.
Now, do you train individuals or do you train groups? Because you might have a manager who's not an HSP, and then they might have employees that are, or vice versa. So shouldn't everybody understand how to get the most out of an HSP versus overwhelming them so that they're, now, every 5 minutes, crashing, shall we say?
You are like stating like my ultimate universal prayer.
Yes, right? Everybody learning that. But I also think there's it's not just HSPs, it's ADHD, it's autism, it's all the things that go together because we are all different, right?
Totally. Exactly. That's literally why I titled my book Different. Exactly that reason. And leaders really would be, in my opinion, as well as my experience, so much more effective, whether that leader is HSP or non-HSP, to stop expecting everyone to be like you or need everyone to be like you, but instead to really be able to maximize everyone's differences. And then therefore create like a full pie approach to, teamwork, team projects, team results, or again, just, even what it is to be self-employed as an individual or as a self-employed person who has a team or as a person who's on a team for someone who is an entrepreneur, right? It all applies. So back to the question of like working one-on-one or working in groups. I love that question. And I love that question in connection to the context that you presented it in. So in the leadership training programs, it's a very unique hybrid of both one-on-one mentoring and training support, as well as community. For exactly that reason, because we need to be seen as individuals and we need the practice of working within a community so that we don't default to that HSP tendency of isolating, right? And defaulting to other primary shadows, which are perfectionism and analysis paralysis, right? So connected to overprotection, connected to overwhelm, often the HSP, they'll isolate and they'll try to get their work to a perfect place before they present it to the team, to the world, also that they won't be caught or called out for being different in any way. That slows productivity down massively and impacts your ability to be effective. So we want the practice in real time of, again, being seen as an individual, but also being seen amongst community, amongst others before things are quote unquote perfect.
I feel like there's going to be some leaders out there or managers, depends how you want to talk about them, that are going to say, look, I can't coddle every one of my members. I have 1,500 people on my team. Or, they just need to do the work. Come in, do the work, be done. Right? And is this coddling? Is this giving preferential treatment? Is this more than understanding?
Such a great question. So it's such a great question because I would say that one of my primary core values for my own self, my own life, my own business, and then therefore the HSPs that I mentor is empowerment. And to me, empowerment is the opposite of enabling. And then therefore the opposite of coddling. Right? Now, again, when an HSP is operating from their shadows, they are self-coddling. That is how the coping mechanisms literally get driven, right? Is rather than learning how to work with the nervous system differently, the HSP or others in the HSP's life or work are enabling their tendency to protect, right? Or enabling their tendency to get overwhelmed. None of that is helpful or productive. And also the approach that you just described of come in and get the work done, in my opinion, is not effective leadership, whether you have HSPs on your team or not. The middle road is education. And I truly believe, and I'll out myself as an educator, like trained in my old career as a teacher, is so incredibly valuable and empowering. So yes, it takes a little bit of effort. It takes a little bit of investment of time and resources. But if you really bring people together on your team, 1,500, 15, 5, or 1, carve out a little bit of space to support with diversity training, which doesn't only apply to race, religion, etc., but applies to nervous system operating regarding productivity, empower people to both learn how they work best and most effectively, and empower everyone on the team to support each other in working effectively, even though that might be different than how you work effectively. The outcome, the reward, right, or return on investment, exponential, like just above and beyond.
And so if the reward is huge, which I can see that, right? Just learning how other people communicate and how other people take in stimulus and all of that would be huge. But what is the antithesis of that? What's the cost of not embracing sensitivity?
Yeah, another amazing question. Crash and burn in simplicity, right? Projects get stalled. Completion is not brought across the finish line. You have employees who or team members who start to act out. Or if you are your own team member, you start to act out. Right? Those are those coping mechanisms. It slows everything down. It makes it that much more clunky, difficult. People are grumpy. They get sick. They have to take more sick days. They quit. Projects
get fired.
Lurch. They get fired. More energy and investment has to go into hiring and rehiring. I mean, we could just go on and on, I think, between the two of us.
So basically what I'm hearing you say is that instead of, just running your team the way you run your team as a leader, right, is that you need to understand how each person actually operates, right? Their operating system, shall we say, right? We all have either MS Word or Apple or whatever, right? It's each person has an operating system. And if you understood that, then you could get your team to kind of work, those cogs would work together. In a way.
Absolutely. And I would say back it up to the hiring process, right? So as an effective leader, you are surveying the needs of your team. And I don't mean what your team members need. I mean what you need from your team members. That's your job as a leader to be able to have that bird's eye view. And then to hire based on that intel. And as part of that would be you as a leader understanding, but also valuing, right? Again, the different strengths that different team members need to bring to different roles. And you would be bringing that into the interview and the hiring process. In my opinion, ideally this work of what it means to have HSPs as business leaders will continue to grow. And then therefore that would become a criteria. For example, in the same way that you might need someone who, really knows, software operations, right?
I almost feel like that should be a question now in interviews of what is your personal operating system? How do you operate? What a great question that would be. I'm sure that would make people really think too about themselves and understand how they operate, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yes.
you know, and look back at their reviews and be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm like a dog on a bone when I'm assigned something, right? Or okay, yeah, I'm going to work myself to exhaustion, right? Like that says a lot, that you're going to give a lot to the company, but it's in the end, it might also take away from that productivity.
Absolutely.
So I think it's a great question.
It's
so
a fantastic question.
If you're going to build this highly sensitive company from scratch, right? Step by step, you were going to build it. What would you look for? Like, how would you do that? And what would it look like?
Well, that's a question that's really from like retrospect for myself, right? Because like when I started my own business, first of all, I was working by myself. Second, I did not know that I was a highly sensitive person. And I've learned a lot over my 22 years of being self-employed and in business, and especially when it comes to team. And I've learned a lot through mistakes that I've made along the way, including, a phase when I knew that I wanted to have HSPs on my team, but I didn't yet realize the degree with which other HSPs needed personal mentoring and attention to be able to work effectively, right? So those have now been built into my hiring systems. Those have been built into my onboarding systems. Those have been built into my team training systems. So the retrospect is like, if I could do it all over again, right, it would be more of using my own HSP visionary strength to be able to forecast or see what types of strengths are really ultimately needed in the various team roles, and then to be able to form those types of interview questions that we were just discussing to really be able to not only identify if a potential team member has those strengths, but to be able to identify if a particular team member understands how to use those strengths, because they are two very different things.
That's really profound, actually. You're right, because you can have the strengths, but not know how to use them, not know how to action them in a way that's productive.
That's right.
All right. So I'm going to do a quick fire on you. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
One daily habit that helps you stay grounded.
Using my own nervous system management tool that's called the Belief Transformation Tool every morning.
Ooh, you're going to have to tell me what that is. I can't just run into another quick fire on that one.
So the Belief Transformation Tool is designed to do exactly what it sounds like, which is to take a limiting belief and over time to be able to transform it into an ideal belief or a supportive belief. And it's a process that can be ongoing as it reveals next level. And grounds me every single day, keeps my vibe high, and helps me to, take on tasks that might feel impossible at the beginning of the day. But then I'm able to see how I can do that. And I can do that in a way that's supportive for myself as an HSP.
I love that, actually. I'm going to adopt that now immediately, because I think it's great. I think it's great for everybody, right? We all have limiting beliefs, whether you're HSP or not. And so to adopt that and how to flip it around and to make it a positive, I think everybody could use that. So, all right, back to quickfire. Ready? If your nervous system could leave you a voicemail, what would it say after a long work day?
Take a bath.
Ooh, I love a good bath. That definitely does help. I agree. All right. What's your go-to soundtrack for powering through a stressful workday?
Sarah McLachlan.
I can see that. Okay, one more. One mindset shift that you repeat to yourself before taking a big leap.
Everything comes to me in the exact right time, space, and sequence.
Ooh, powerful. Love it. Okay, I'm a listener right now, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, everything you just said might be me. I'm feeling this. What is the first step they can take tomorrow to try to lead differently or to show up at work differently?
Yeah, find out if you're a highly sensitive person or if someone else on your team might be a highly sensitive person. You can do that more from the entrepreneurial perspective on my website. You can do that from the general population perspective on Dr. Elaine Aron's website.
Fantastic. And what is your hope for the future of leadership for highly sensitive professionals out there? How do they own it, step into their power, and just be who they are?
Dare to go against the tide.
Ooh, expand, please.
So there's so much lockdown these days regarding willingness to stand out and fear regarding standing out. But when you use the word hope, I equate to the definition of hope equals act for betterment. And if you're really tuned in to your own strengths, your own values, that will support you and be able to take actions that will move things forward in the direction of betterment, even if, especially if that has you standing out as different.
I love it. And that's for HSPs or anybody out there, quite frankly. I feel like that relates to everyone. Just be you, be yourself.
Yeah.
Heather, this has been so enlightening for me and empowering, I hope, for the audience that is listening to this. Where can people find you?
Businessmiracles.com. Businessmiracles.com.
And the name of your book once again?
Different.
It couldn't be any easier to remember. Just be different and be proud of it. Thank you so much, Heather, for coming today. I truly appreciate you coming on Work Unscripted. I hope leaders will take all of your words to heart and think about a different way of leading, maybe a way they never thought about before.
Thank you so much. An amazing podcast you have.